Welcome today. I'm so excited to be here with Word Vancouver for a legendary tale. And I'm your host, Alison Tedford Seaweed. I'm a Kwakiutl woman living and working on the unceded traditional territories of the Semeth and Matswe First Nations. We are joined today by Buffy Sainte-Marie, and we're so excited to get to chat with her today. I'm going to go through a few housekeeping items, and then we will get to an introduction and some questions. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to type in the chat where you're from, what school you're from. We're excited to welcome Nelna Bessie John in Beaver Creek and Holy Family in Whitehorse, two schools joining us through the Connected North program, and a hi hello to other Connected North friends who will be joining us on the replay. So if you have appreciation comments, please feel free to type them in the chat. You won't have access to your camera or mic during this session. And if you are looking to purchase books, Buffy has amazing books and you can get them through Iron Dog Books, our official bookseller. We also have a silent auction happening as part of the festival. And we'd like to take a moment to thank our generous donors and sponsors, SFU and the Writers Studio for their continued generous support of Word Vancouver, the Canada Arts Council, the Canada Book Fund, the Canada Heritage Fund, Canada Periodical Fund, BC Arts Council, BC Gaming, Creative BC, City of Vancouver, DBVIA, the Joseph Wask Family Foundation, the Hamber Foundation, the BC and Yukon Book Prizes, the Asian Canadian Writers Workshop, Seawill, Payson Associates, the Crime Writers Association, Federation of BC Writers, the Surrey Library, Vancouver Public Library, the League of Canadian Poets, the Writers Union of Canada, the Vines Festival, and many more. For a full list of our partners, please visit our website. Without you, this free festival could not happen. If you haven't already, please consider making a donation via our website. But without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Buffy Sainte-Marie. She changed the world that she was born into. For 5 decades, over 16 studio albums, Buffy, troubadour, songwriter, spiritual tourist, social provocateur, educator, mixed media digital artist, and children's book author, has shared her views on Indigenous rights, decolonization, and the environment. If you have questions for Buffy, if you could put them in the Q&A, in the event we have time for questions, and we will definitely take a look at those. But thank you so much, Buffy, for being here. I had the pleasure of watching you perform on Sunday at the Chan Center.
Hi,
And
everybody.
hi.
Alison, thank you for inviting me to participate today. I wish I were in Whitehorse today. I happen to be in Vancouver, but I've had so much fun in Whitehorse, and you guys have been so nice to me for the Blue Feather Festival and Gary Bailey and friends and family. So, hi, everybody.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I got to watch you at the Chan Center on Sunday, and it was so amazing.
Oh, you had fun?
Yes, I was in the second row, and you were incredible. So thank you.
Yeah, we were rocking. It was a lot of fun.
It was so fun. I was like, I hope I have it like that eventually because you're just so dynamic. So thank you so much for joining us. I had to listen to the audiobook version of Tâpwê last night, so that was really fun. And I'd love to hear from you. What inspired you to write Tâpwê? I know it's something you wrote while your son was growing up.
Yeah, actually started the idea of Tâpwê and the Magic Hat just because mostly of about the people that I was spending so much time with. My family at Pie Potts Reserve, which is in the Qu'Appelle Valley in Saskatchewan. And, really this story has grown out of my experiences with real live people, whether it's sitting around the drum, getting ready for a powwow, or spending time with elders who were so sweet to me, or bouncing kids on my knee, and then seeing them grow up and change and year after year become more and more wonderful and go through their trials. So the story actually, I started the actual story when my own son was just little, and I had never thought about it before, and maybe you guys haven't either, but when you're writing a story about a child, the child keeps getting older and older. So I started the story and for a little kid, and by the time I finished the story, he was all grown up. So Tâpwê and the Magic Hat is about a boy whose name is Tâpwê, and in Cree language, Tâpwê means right on or true or you betcha, and it is a real name. And Tâpwê is a boy who has some adventures, and some of his adventures are really a lot of fun, and some of his adventures get him into trouble. And he actually has to challenge himself. He does get into trouble, which he blames sometimes on other people, and then it turns out, it really, I had something to do with it. So it's really kind of an interesting book about a child going through changes as he visits his relatives on a reserve quite far away.
Wonderful. Thank you. It was such a great story. I just loved it. And I loved listening to you tell it in the audiobook form. And I would just love it if you wouldn't mind sharing some of it with our audience. And I bet they would love to hear you read from it. I have my copy in English and Cree, so that's pretty exciting. But yeah, if there's a part that you think would be most fun for us to listen to, I would love
gosh, it's hard to choose. I'll show you a picture of the book. Here's what it looks like. And Greystone Books are the ones who actually turned it from a story into a book that you can hold it in your hand. And thank you for mentioning that it's not only a book in print, but also an audible book. And I am what you would call a biblioholic. That means I love books, and I love books in print. And sometimes I have a book in print, and sometimes if I love it enough, I also have it as an audiobook to listen to. And sometimes I love an audiobook so much that I'll go out and buy the print book. So Tâpwê and the Magic Hat is in both. And I also have to thank Greystone Books because I just begged them to also make the book in Cree, which we did. But I'm going to read you something just from the beginning of Tâpwê and the Magic Hat. And what happens is that his grandmother is telling Tâpwê about the magic hat itself, which she had received when she was a little girl, and now she's passing it on to Tâpwê, and she's telling him about some of the adventures that she's had with the magic hat. So one day, Kokum, which means grandmother, one day the grandmother, she had only had the magic hat on her head for a little while, and she was very surprised to find out that they were alive, the little creatures on the magic hat, who are little bluebirds and little baby grass snakes who are pink and purple. And they lead Tâpwê along, and they're talking about a bear. And Kokum, as a young woman wearing this magic hat on her head, she's afraid of bears. But it turns out that they're hearing a little song too. And so it says here, we looked up the path. These little footprints were leading on clear as day. And there, right at the spot where the footprints ended, was a wiggly patch of berry bushes. I tiptoed down the path. Up popped the sugar bear. He was fluffy and brown, about the size of a great big puppy, and just as cute. Tansé, I said, my mouth hanging open. Tansé, my dears, said the Shewinigan bear, the sugar bear, stepping out of the bushes pigeon-toed with a basket of berries over his arm, happy indeed to see me in the magic hat. Oh, I said, because you're not going to believe this, but I was sure the little bear had been brown, and now he was white. I've been waiting for you, said the Shewinigan bear. My darlings, I thought you'd never catch up. My, but you're slow. I told the little bear that I'd been afraid he might be fierce, and that I had almost run away. And this made him giggle, and when he did, he turned a sunny shade of yellow, and then to the color of a peach, right before my eyes. "Cha," said the little bear, "see how you are. Look, the picnic is all ready. Michisatan, let's eat." Kokum described how the Shewinigan bear reached into his picnic basket and began to spread out the contents on the ground. That basket was pale green and smelled like sunshine. Tâpwê, who was listening to her tell the story, looked at his grandmother, his eyes wide. "Sweetgrass," he whispered. "That's right," said Kokum, and out from that sweetgrass basket came branches and branches loaded with berries, more branches than any ordinary basket could ever hold. There was even a pitcher of Saskatoon punch, big enough for all of us to share. The Shawinigan bear turned from cloud pink to baby blue and back again. "My darlings," he said, "this is for us all." And as I looked at the food the Shawinigan bear was sharing with us, I thought about the choke cherries that my mama and I had pounded that morning. There wasn't very much, but I reached into my pocket and laid the little package in front of the sugar bear. "Miigwet," said the little bear, "my favorite thing, generosity." And he smiled a rainbow smile that filled the field with colors. I thought I would turn inside out with delight. We even forgot about being hungry. We turned around and around, watching the colors change in the field, and wherever we looked, we saw the Shawinigan bear. We played slide down the rainbow 24 times before we finally decided to eat our lunch, and was it ever good? And then we all decided to take a rest in the shade.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's just such a great story, and you tell it so beautifully. So thank you very much for sharing your words with us. Tâpwê talks about dancing to the beat of your own drum. What are some of the ways that you have danced to the beat of your own drum in your own life?
Well, I was kind of by myself as a child. I was adopted away in the big scoop, as many Indigenous children were, and I was raised in an adoptive family in Maine and Massachusetts in the States on the East Coast. So, and my mom was part Mi'kmaq, but she didn't know very much about Indigenous anything back then. And she told me when I grew up I could find out. So I was a little bit different from the other kids in my school. I was a little bit isolated. I was even told that I couldn't be a musician and I would fail in music classes, and I was kind of shunned and shamed, and I wasn't allowed to be in band or anything because I couldn't read European notation. But you know what? Instead of that making me sad and mad, I would go home and I would sit down at the piano and I would play anything I heard on the radio by ear. I didn't need lessons. I didn't need to learn how to read European notation. So that's one way that I learned how to dance to the heartbeat of my own drum. Another way, I was told that I couldn't be Indigenous because the people who were running things in the town where I lived, they didn't know any other Indigenous people. They thought that we had all been wiped out. And they told me that I must be mistaken. And even later, when I was writing songs about Indigenous stuff, when I was getting quite famous in my 20s, sometimes people would hear me talking or singing about Indigenous issues, talking about how our land had been stolen, or talking about residential schools which they had never heard of, and they would be quite upset and heartbroken and pitying us, but they didn't really believe it, and they would say, "Oh, the little Indian girl must be mistaken." But now, 50 years later, since Truth and Reconciliation, many people understand that sometimes we as children or as Indigenous people, sometimes we know something that the general population doesn't know yet because they haven't learned it yet. So about residential schools, for instance, I always say the good news about the bad news is that more people know about it now. And Tâpwê in the Magic Hat, this little boy, he has to make some mistakes to realize that sometimes he's really being a jerk, or sometimes he's going around on information that doesn't happen to be true, something that he just believed. And there are so many things that Indigenous children don't even know about that are wonderful. Yeah, there are some bummer things too, but there are some great things that most people don't know about. For instance, did you know that team sports were founded by us, by Indigenous people on this side of the water? And that team sports, including the rubber ball, we invented that. We invented rubber, the rubber ball, the sports stadium with bleachers on either side and goalposts at either end. protective equipment like hip pads and shoulder pads, and helmets with animal logos. All of these team sports, all of that was invented by Indigenous people, and team sports, the rubber ball, etc., had never been found anywhere else in the world except among us. But most people don't know that, and so they don't tell you that in school, usually. So, if you're in the back seat of the car with some friends, and it's football season or hockey season or basketball season or baseball season or lacrosse season, that's something that you can share with them with a real good spirit and something we can all be proud of. It's one of many, many things that Indigenous people have shared with the rest of the world, but to many people the news is new, so you get to tell them.
That is so true and so wonderful. There's so much to be proud of. And I love the way that you encourage people to paddle on both sides of the canoe and share the good news about all of the amazing things Indigenous people are doing. And that's part of what we are loving doing today, and sharing your words and your accomplishments. And so we're just so grateful that you're able to be here.
Thank you.
Do you have any advice for kids or even grown-ups who are, wanting to think about, how they can be themselves and why that is so important?
I do. I have a couple of little pieces of advice. One of them is to keep your nose on the joy trail. The joy trail. Other people sometimes, they're off on their own trip, but you yourself, you have your own special path, your own way. And, one thing that I never do, even as a child, that I stopped doing, I don't put negative things into my head. Like, I don't read horror comics. I don't watch horror movies because it's all imaginary anyway, and I don't want that cluttering up my dreams. I seek out good things, healthy things. I'm real old. I'm 81, believe it or not, and I'm healthy, and I have a great time. I have just as much fun as I ever had. And I think it's because really, instead of hanging out with friends who are bullying me, I find new friends. Friends who are bullying me, they don't know yet. They don't know what I have inside me. Try hard to make your own dreams come true. Somebody just made a movie about me, and it was just at the Toronto International Film Festival, and the director received an award for it. And the way we started out with this movie, it kind of is another way of answering your question, because it's a line from a song, and it says, some will tell you what you really want ain't on the menu. Don't believe them. Cook it up yourself, and then prepare to serve them. So what I say to children and adults is that you have so much inside of yourself that nobody knows about yet. They don't even know enough to ask you to give you a gift. And sometimes it takes a long time, and your gift is always ripening and getting better. But most people they don't know about it, so they don't alert you to it. But believe it yourself. Believe in those beautiful things, those beautiful dreams that you have yourself, and take care of them. And eventually, when you get a chance, share it with them, whether it's telling them about team sports, or whether it's telling them about the song in your heart, or whether it's just being yourself and sharing yourself in a way that you don't even have to announce it. You don't have to tear anything down. You can just give it and share it with others. It works.
Absolutely. And I just love the way that you share your gift with the world. It's so inspiring and engaging and wonderful. So thank you. Tâpwê, like we talked about earlier, is available in Cree. Why do you consider language learning so important?
Here's the way I think about it. We've been trying to revitalize Indigenous languages in North America for a real long time. Even in the 1960s, when I was just in my 20s, we were trying. But now we're having more success. There's just more people trying harder in better and additional ways, I think. And the way I look at it is European languages like French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, they're like fingers, and they're very similar, and they do a similar job, but a thumb is different. An Indigenous language from thousands and thousands of years ago, isolated from those other languages, they function differently. And alternative languages that are not related to one another, it's a whole different set of human accomplishments that go on in the brain. Indigenous languages approach the world differently. We see things differently. We express things differently. I'm just thrilled that the great Solomon Rat is the head of Native languages at First Nations University in Regina, Saskatchewan. He's a Cree speaker and a Cree teacher. He translates my songs and many other things into Cree at a website called creeliteracy.org, creeliteracy.org. And just the fact that together we managed to encourage Greystone Books to put the book out in Cree, to me is, it says something wonderful, not only about our languages, but also about other people finally understanding that our languages are, it's not just different words for the same old things. We're talking about different things. We're talking about different values, the values of hospitality, the values of being kind to each other. Because one of the things that Indigenous scholars, intellectuals found when they were first meeting European people in the 16, 17, 1800s, because they did learn one another's languages, you know. There were Huron and Haudenosaunee, many other Indigenous people on the East Coast who learned how to speak English and French. And there were English, and French people who learned how to speak Indigenous languages. So this is not new. It hasn't gotten big and popular, but it isn't new. And some of the things that Indigenous people were telling Europeans, they showed up in the thinking of what's called the Enlightenment, the French Enlightenment. And throughout Europe, we have had an influence, although people forgot where they learned it. But scholars today will point out that part of the Indigenous criticism of Europe was about heartful things. Why don't you guys get along better? Why don't you support each other? Why is your politics all about the meanest guy is on top and scares everybody else? Why don't you have life in a circle where everybody participates? You know, because there are many, many ways that the people govern ourselves. And Indigenous ways are only now being discovered by the rest of the world as having great value. They knew it in the 16 and 1700s. It's been forgotten. Mostly only scholars know about it now, but you can find out. And it's ongoing, and I do believe it's ripening.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that that's something that people don't always realize. Like in my language, which is Kwakwala, the word for child is my reason for breathing. Like that's a cultural value around the value of a child within a community. So that's something that
Alison, along that same lines, if I can jump in, I just remembered Keith Goulet was at one time Minister of Northern Affairs and Indian Affairs in Saskatchewan. And he explained to me once about Cree language. He said, like, I think he called it the gun theory. He said that if the word in Cree for baby is one word, but the word for doll kind of means like a fake baby. And the word for son is, it's like spoken in a sacred tense. It's a living thing like a baby is, but the word for watch has a different verb form, and it kind of means a fake son. And the word for chief in Cree is one word, and it's spoken in a sparkly, sacred way, the verb tense. But the word for politician is kind of like a fake chief. And that always made me laugh. So our languages are really different and really fun. I'm not a Cree speaker. Solomon Rat helps me. He helped. There's a glossary in Tâpwê and the Magic Hat, so you can learn a little bit of Cree words. But I really encourage people of all ages, no matter how young or old you are, to continue to learn your language, because you're going to learn a whole lot more than just different words for the same thing. You're going to learn underlying things that are just precious and very much needed on this planet that we live on today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Within language, there's lots of information about plants and things that we need in order to take better care of the earth.
And how to treat each other.
Definitely. I love that. So if anybody has questions, please feel free to put them in our either in our Q&A or the chat, and I will watch for them. But Buffy, I just wanted to see, like, do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to share and messages that you'd like to have our young guests know about things that you've either learned in your life or about your experience writing these books or your travels? We just love to hear more from you and your
Well, I would like to say that Tâpwê and the Magic Hat it has a couple of traditional stories kind of interwoven into it, but it's an original book. It's a unique book, and some of the stories that old Mr. Kashawatam tells or that happen are not traditional. They're new traditional style stories. And this is about keeping our traditions and our language and our culture alive. Our culture is not only about old stuff, it's also about what you yourself bring forward as a young person, as a middle person, as an old person. It's your stories too. Our culture is still alive. And we kind of suffer from a time stereotype where, if when I was coming up in my 20s and I first entering show business, the business people all thought I ought to wear an Indian costume. What? But they weren't asking the Jewish performers to wear a yarmulke. They were not asking the white girl performers to wear a pilgrim costume or a wedding dress, but they always expected me to show up in what they thought was an Indian costume. So there's all kinds of misconceptions and boneheadedness that you run into in life, but don't let it get you down. It's just they don't know yet. Don't even spend your precious energy being mad at that. They can learn if you have especially kind ways to teach them, like team sports. Then so don't feel that you need to tear things down in order to present who you are or to make up new stories, make up new songs. That in no way takes away from what's already there. Another thing that I'd like to mention that in Tâpwê and the Magic Hat, there's a trickster character. And in some of our cultures, the trickster's a raven or a coyote. And I chose, especially since the book is for children, I chose the rabbit because this trickster he's naughty and he'll trick you and he'll lead you down the wrong path, but he's basically playful. But in many trickster stories, he can even be mean. He makes you fall into the hole that you've created yourself by your own boneheadedness, which we all do, right? We all do that. So what happens to Tâpwê is that he kind of abandons the creatures on his magic hat. And he abandons his new friends who are his relatives. And he starts spending all his time with the trickster, he kind of makes the trickster into, a big brother, and he's looking up to the trickster. And he gets into all kinds of trouble by not being himself, and by not being kind, and by just doing stupid things in order to try and impress someone else. And we all go through that, especially in school. There's some bully or somebody that you admire, and you forget who you are because you're trying to deal with whatever their problem is, So there is a way of being with other people and still being yourself that I hope everybody is able to deal with. It kind of comes and goes. You have better days and worse days, but in the long run, you are you. Nobody else is. And as it says in the story, it says, the trickster is just fine like he is. He is our one and only trickster. But if Tâpwê was like the trickster, and not like Tâpwê, we'd all be the poorer for it. So we have to have the courage, even when nobody's encouraging us, to be ourselves. And sometimes that self doesn't seem very big. Sometimes it's a secret little self within yourself. It's that voice that you kind of hear in the back of your mind. It's that voice in your heart that will keep you safe when somebody else is just trying to do stupid things in order to impress somebody. It's that voice that keeps you safe, that keeps you from walking down dark alleys and reading horror comics and participating in things that you know are dangerous just because someone else is leading you down that way. Be yourself. Be yourself.
I love that. I love that. It's very important to remember. Miss Amelia asked, how long have you been writing stories for children? I know you've got Tâpwê, and I know that you have another beautiful picture book that I was really delighted to receive. But how long have you been writing stories like these?
Gosh, stories and songs happen in my head, and they have all my life. I've always been able to use my imagination and find stories, mostly to entertain myself. I wasn't writing books, which sounds very adult and kind of boring, but it's not. But I've always had stories happening to me, or I've always been experiencing them, and songs as well. I started to write down Tâpwê and the Magic Hat, a long time ago, probably in the 70s. But then I put it aside and I'd work on it every now and then as a book. And finally, Greystone Books helped me to actually turn it into, a physical book with a cover and pages and things. But a lot of my songs have stories in them too. And one of my favorite books that I wrote actually is a song, and it's about pet adoption. And I used to sing this little song to my pets when I'd bring them home from the shelter, because all of my pets have been shelter pets. A horse, lots of goats, wild pigs and wild chickens, kitties, dogs. And I would sing them this song, hey, hey, little rockabye, hey, hey, little darling, hey, hey, little rockabye, you got somebody loves you. You didn't have no chance and you didn't have no vote. When they dropped you off at the shelter, all you had was your little fur coat. And now you got somebody loves you. Meow, you got somebody loves you. So little songs and stories just pop into my head. But what I'm trying to say is some of them are small. Some are little stories, and that's good. Some is a big fat book, bigger stories that have chapters. So whatever it is that's happening in your imagination, I mean, maybe it's a story, maybe it's a poem, maybe it's an idea or a song, maybe it's just a list of things that you think go together. Maybe it has to do with sports or something else that you love to do. But that's yours. And if you want to, you can work on it and get it into shape so that you can present it to other people. That's what I mean by some will tell you what you really want ain't on the menu. Of course it's not on the menu because it's still in your head. Don't believe them, cook it up yourself, turn it into something that everybody can hear besides you, and then prepare to serve them. It works real well for me. It might work for you guys too.
Thank you so much. I'm an author too, and I just love getting to share those words with people. So it's really neat to hear that. When you have people who ask you either to wear things like to perform being Indigenous, and you don't feel comfortable, is that a situation where you tend to take time to educate people around the request, or is that something that you tend to kind of keep that's not something we're doing here, or does it really depend on the situation?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the situation. Sometimes they do it one way and sometimes they do it another way. But I'm a teacher. I went to college. I went to the University of Massachusetts. It's the best thing I ever did. If you can try and go to college or university, it's not like high school. It's really, really wonderful. You get to choose what you learn. And I was really hungry to learn. And one of the things that I've brought into my music career, television career, I was on Sesame Street for for 5.5 years. And one of the things that, in answer to your question about how do I teach people something they don't know, you never scold the student for not knowing. That's why you're there. I mean, that's the fun part. If somebody doesn't know something and somebody says something that you think is kind of lame or whatever, you don't have to correct them, But if you think it's right and if it feels right, you do get to give them the gift of just letting them know. But don't scold them. Don't scold them or you're going to lose them, you know. It's kind of like catching a fish with a marshmallow. You know, it's soft. It's lovely. You don't scold somebody for not knowing about our culture. You find a way that tastes good. You know, you don't get bitter and scoldy and like that. You don't have to do that. It's too much of a burden to be angry all the time. For me, that's how it is for me. To carry anger and bitterness as a burden isn't good. I do get angry, you know, I get angry and I get disappointed and stuff, but I don't hold on to it. I don't carry it as a grudge or as my badge of identity. I try, if I can, to let stuff go in one ear to register and out the other ear. And then if I get a chance to turn that into something, I make sure that it tastes good. I'm not going to give somebody an angry lecture. I'm going to give them something that I thought about a little bit, and I figure out, how am I going to make this person fall in love with our culture? Because our cultures are incredible. They just haven't been presented properly.
That's so true. I love that. One of the questions that we always ask people in part of our the fireside chat program that I'm involved with Connected North is we ask what advice you'd have for somebody who's considering leaving home for school or for work. Like if somebody's going away to try an opportunity, what should they keep in mind as they go?
Well, I do encourage that. I think it's good to get out of your hometown, no matter where you come from. Whether you come from the city or the country, you know, go the other way. I feel as though when you first enter, for instance, when an Indigenous student first enters a non-Indigenous college, it's a shock. It's as if a whole bunch of students are standing in front of a mirror and you see everybody except yourself. You know, if you're the only Indigenous person in the room, it can feel lonely, it can feel uncomfortable, but it can also feel wonderful. But you have to reach deep inside for good things. You do. And a lot of our families were raised by, you know, in residential schools, basically by the military, who didn't like us and who exploited us and did terrible things to us. And a lot of our families include people who were so bullied that they themselves, they've raised children in families of bullying. And if only we can get rid of the bullying, you know, and the abuse, the alcohol and the drugs that have been carried forward from those terrible things that happened to our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents in earlier days. If only we can get through that, we're strong, we're stronger. But it's hard. I would say the same advice as I gave before. If you're in a new situation, take advantage of all the wonderful things. Keep your nose on the joy trail. Study what you want to study. Seek out people who are wonderful, not just somebody who's got an axe to grind or doesn't like you or is in competition with you or wants to be more popular. All of that stuff is negativity that you don't have to be around. Find some better friends. Seek out good friends and good information.
I love that. That's such great advice. You're such a trailblazer, but going first sometimes can be a little bit nerve-wracking or a little scary. How do you get brave to go first in all of the wonderful things that you're doing in the world?
Well, I wasn't planning to go first. It's just that I saw something that needed to be done and nobody was doing it, so I did it, you know. I mean, in the 60s, all of the famous folk singers, they were out at the civil rights marches, at the big photo ops and showing up in magazines, but I wasn't invited. I mean, that was all bought and paid for. Their managers and record companies and agents were putting them in front of the cameras. That's what was going on. But there was nobody covering the Indigenous base. I wanted to cover that base. I wanted to give my audiences things that they couldn't get somewhere else. I got a lot of support from the African American Black community. I mean, people like Joan Baez and Pete Seeger were not supporting Indigenous stuff. You know who was? Muhammad Ali, who was a friend of mine. Ken Norton, who was also a world champion boxer. Stevie Wonder, Marlon Brando, he was helping, but most people were not. So I didn't mean to go first. It's just that, and I didn't think I was going to last in show business either, let alone have a long career. When I first started as a singer, Alison and everybody else, I didn't think I was going to last. I didn't think I was much of a singer. I don't even like my earlier records very much, except for the songs. The only way that I had the courage as a young Indigenous woman from the middle of nowhere, it didn't know anybody, had no connections. The only way that I had the courage to get on stage was because of the content of the songs. I knew that these songs were original. I knew that they were a different way of presenting Indigenous culture. I knew that my love songs were dynamite. I knew that Until It's Time for You to Go was irresistible. Even though I didn't think I was the greatest singer, I knew that the songs were great and that they were original and that they were different from anything anybody had heard before. Not because I was in an Indian costume, but because I was a great songwriter, and I knew that. Because I had been loving making songs since I was a little kid, since before I was in school. I was a natural musician. And I told you, I didn't learn how to read white man's music because I didn't need to. Because the kind of natural musician I am, and most of you guys are, even though nobody's encouraging you, the kind of natural musician I was like Beethoven and Mozart before anybody had learned how to write it down. Natural music, Indigenous ways, survival skills come before somebody tries to make money off it. And although music literacy and music teachers are very wonderful in a way, so are natural musicians. And I'm always telling the Junos that they ought to have a little 1-minute video just showing all of the musicians who can't read music and they still have great careers in the music industry. People like Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, Wes Montgomery, Chet Atkins, Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, me, Joni Mitchell. We didn't take any lessons. We didn't learn it in school because it's natural. And I tell you that some will tell you what you really want in on the menu. That's because each person's menu is different, and so is yours. And we all have our natural gifts. Maybe yours isn't in writing or, the stuff I do. Maybe it's in, basketball or beadwork or community relations. But we all have our gifts. And it's up to you to keep your nose on that inner joy trail and find your gift. And then if you want to, polish it up so that other people can understand it too, and share it. It's a lot of fun.
That's wonderful advice. Thank you. You've met so many people over the years and made some really incredible friends. What's it like meeting people that you really look up to? Like, I know for me, I was very nervous and I was like, I hope I remember my name tomorrow. But what's it like for you when you meet somebody and have that maybe a little bit, nervous or intimidated? How do you share yourself with people that you look up to?
I think in that kind of situation, I try not to think about myself. I just think about the other person. Recently, I had a Zoom call with the Dalai Lama. And that's something that I could never have imagined. Now, when I was in college, I majored in Oriental philosophy and religion. So the Dalai Lama for me was kind of like, it might be for a Catholic person meeting the Pope, someone that you really look up to. But I wasn't thinking about myself and the kind of impression I was going to make on the Dalai Lama. I was thinking about listening instead of talking. I kind of wanted to listen to what he had to say. So I got to ask him some questions, and in every case, he answered in the same way, which is true to his path. The answer was always mindfulness, that means paying attention, and compassion. Not scolding, but teaching and giving. And that was right up my alley, and so I wasn't nervous at all. And I think that there are some tricks to, for instance, if you have anxiety because you're going to fly on an airplane and that scares you, or you have to give a speech and that scares you. Because when you start to get anxious, that's not imaginary. Something happens when you start to get anxious, you get too much carbon dioxide in your blood. And there's a very simple trick to overcoming that. And I'll tell you how you do it. It doesn't matter how fast or how slow you go, but you take a breath in, 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold it, 1, 2, 3, 4. You exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's called square breathing. And what that actually does, it changes the balance of carbon dioxide and oxygen in your blood. And then that scary feeling goes away. And it's a real good trick. And I don't know why people don't talk about it more. And the other trick is just listen to the other guy.
Yes, yes, I'm very lucky. You're wonderful. I just can't get over the fact that you were on Zoom with the Dalai Lama.
I can't get over it.
I wonder what his background was like.
It was lovely. It was really lovely.
That's so amazing.
And there were other participants there too, so I got to listen to them. Yeah, there are things about, as a creative person, and creativity is not just about writing books and songs, creativity is about everything. We create our worlds, we create our communities. And even in the Bible, which doesn't come from our side of the water, but even in the Bible it says we're made in the image of the Creator. That, for me, that's our green light for creativity. We're not supposed to hold back and just follow the rules that, Parliament or somebody is telling us. We have additional things to contribute. We're responsible for making the world better at any age we can. We can improve somebody's day. So if we're made in the image of the Creator, that's our green light for creativity. We can create our books, our stories, our songs, our communities, our families. We can expand. So, it's almost kind of a way of my Indigenous religion, but I don't like to use the word religion, but just the way that elders have taught me about being in a clean spot, burning some sweetgrass or whatever it is that you do. Just taking the time to be with the Creator. To me, that's the most nourishing thing that I can do, just eat by myself or with someone else. And whenever you do that, it just clears your mind and strengthens your heart, in my experience.
Absolutely. That's so wonderful. Thank you. I watched your video, the paddling on both sides of the canoe at the concert, and I just really loved it. And I just would love to hear, would you mind sharing that teaching with our guests here in terms of why it's so important to share the positive and the history, and the positive aspects of the history of our people?
Well, what Alison's referring to, you guys, is I made 2 little, real quick 1-minute videos. And by the way, Alison, you can share those. You can share those anywhere. I mean, you can put them on your feed. You can put, your Instagram, whatever, if that's what you do, or here, at the festival, you can share those. And the 2 little tiny animated videos that I made. And the first one I called Paddling on Both Sides. And the way I started it was to say, they're animated, by the way. I said, it's so hard for people now, especially children, all of the bad news that we hear about, residential schools and missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and history. Oh, how about we share some of the good things? Some of the great contributions that Indigenous people have made to the world. And I tell them all about how team sports and the rubber ball, how we are really responsible for the entire game, the look, the tools, the ball that's involved in team sports all over the world today. And if we do have to know about the negative realities in our world, like residential school, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and our history, yes. But if we only paddle on one side of the canoe, we're going to go in circles. So we need both. We need to understand the tough things, And we really need to celebrate the great things and to share those too. And that way, we go forward.
I love that. That's such a great thing to keep in mind. I think that's a beautiful thought to close our time together. But I just really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. And we're just so excited to be able to share your words and to have the opportunity to meet with you, and for our friends in the north to get to join in as well. And so thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I hope that your travels are safe as you are making your way back home. And yeah, so thank you so very much. And I want to thank everybody who joined us today. And please do, like we said, you can find your copy of Tâpwê through Iron Dog Books and or anywhere that books are sold. And I also want to thank all the staff and volunteers at Word Vancouver for making this possible. We have so many events happening as part of the festival, lots of wonderful, engaging children's programming online and in person. I'm going to be hosting something at the Surrey Library on Thursday, so I'm really excited for that. But there's lots to explore, and we're so grateful, Buffy, that you were able to join us and make this day so very special. So thank you so much.
Oh, me too. I wish I was really with you guys. But kinanas komiten, kichimi kwech. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.